So, hello and welcome to the campfire.
Hi, thank you.
Today we have Hannah Phinney, who's here with us to talk about the work that she does at Samsung Research America. Very exciting, and a topic that we haven't yet talked about on the campfire. So, really excited to have you here, Hannah. Hannah has her MA in linguistics from San Francisco State University. Woohoo! And she also has some background in framing, which we'll hear more about next week. But hopefully, Hannah can give us a little bit of, we'll kind of dip into her background, I'm sure, as we tell her story. But I think a great place to start would be where you're at now. You know, I know people love to hear details of work, and especially since you're, relatively new at your position, I think you're kind of in a mindset where you can kind of remember what it's like to be
Oh yeah.
at a new workplace. So
Sure.
bring us into your day to day.
Okay. So yeah, thanks again for having me on. I'm really excited to be doing this. I am currently, as you said, at Samsung Research America. There's a campus down in Mountain View, so it's the heart of Silicon Valley. And I live in San Francisco, so it's kind of a crazy commute. I won't even tell you how long.
Do you do those buses?
I do bus, I do train, Caltrain, yeah, all of it.
Oh man.
I get a lot done on the train, which is the good side of it. But yeah, I started very recently, just about 4 months ago, and it feels like a lot longer though, because the days are really long and really intense. And that might sound like a bad thing that it feels longer, but I think it's actually a good thing because I feel like I'm maximizing each day basically.
Because the cliche is right that you're never going to be challenged when you leave an academic context. You're never going to be learning, and that's so far from the truth.
Yeah. And then also, the older you get, time seems to fly by faster. And so it's really nice to be like, oh, 4 months, it seems like, the opposite. It seems like a lot longer.
Great.
So yeah, I am my official position is actually linguist, the title, which they also call us language experts, so linguist / LE we're called, and I'm on a pretty small team of LEs, linguists, of 12. Actually, I'm one of 12, so 11 other linguists, and we work it's really collaborative. And we work a lot with other engineers and QA testers, project managers, most closely probably with the engineers and QA testers. So there's a lot more people. And the project, I should have said at the beginning, is called Bixby, and it's Samsung's answer basically to the voice personal assistant thing that's going on.
Yeah.
Competition for Apple's Siri, Google's Google Assistant, Cortana.
I have a Samsung. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, it's improving all the time. Definitely, work in progress. But yeah, so we're on the Bixby team, and Bixby was officially released about a couple months ago. There's actually a Bixby button on the new Samsung Galaxy 8 phones. And then, and there was some support for all of the core features of the phone, and now we're working on developing, support for more and more applications, more and more apps. And so the ultimate goal is basically for Bixby is for the user to be able to do anything with their phone through voice, through voice commands that they could do with through touch. And that's a pretty all-encompassing goal, but yeah, so that's what we're working on.
So what does your work in that team look like?
So I was gonna say, I think the linguist teams, one of our primary tasks is creating the training data for the machine learning models to be able to, process these commands, utterances from users and actually accomplish on the phone what the user, wants to accomplish. And so we write these things called grammars, actually. And they're basically, a grammar is a file. And in it, so the way things are kind of organized and divided up is by domain, they're called, but a domain is basically an app. So by app. And then for each app, there are a particular number of rules, they're called, which are basically like sample or kind of idealized utterance that wants to achieve a particular intent on the phone. So an example is, open my, whatever your text messaging app is. So open my text messenger and write a text to Joe, saying I'll see you later, and send it. Something like that. So that could be a sample utterance basically for a rule. And with that, if a user says that to a phone, you would expect, if you have a well-functioning voice, product, that that would carry out that task to completion. So what we do for each of these rules is write grammars that they're called substitution grammars. And so you basically take, all the words that you could think of that could express this intent and come up with a bunch of synonyms for each word. And they have to be, contextually valid synonyms, which is very important, obviously. And then we think of those synonyms, and then we think of basically different syntactic combinations of the utterances, and that all goes in a grammar file for each of these rules. And then from there, we expand these out, it's called. So there's a script that takes these substitution grammars and expands them into however many utterances you specify. It's usually in the thousands, so 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 utterances. Wow. And it basically combines all the different words in the syntactic combinations that you specified, and then for each rule, for each intent, and then that is the training data basically that is fed to the models that do the machine learning models. And so that's in a nutshell, that is one of our main tasks.
So how do you learn how to do that? Did you arrive knowing how to do that?
No. In the interview, they said, my interviewee on the phone and then in person said something about grammar writing, and, coming from an academic background, I was like, well, I know what grammar is. I don't know what grammar in the context of whatever you're talking about is, because obviously they didn't give me, enough, quite as much information. And so, I said, I know about semantics and syntax, I'm sure I could do it. And
I guess you can.
Yeah. And honestly, the grammar writing part for most of us, I'll speak for the LE team, is probably the most fun part, and also one of the easiest parts of the tasks that we're doing right now. It's not actually that complex linguistically, I would say. Basically just it's kind of basic, synonym finding, syntax variants, and a little bit of morphology and parts of speech. It's relatively straightforward. We have been handed over the last couple months more and more of the engineering tasks, because some of the engineers have automated some of the machine learning steps, and automated I'll use air quotes because inevitably, things go wrong even in this kind of automated setup that they have for us, where we're just ideally supposed to click a few buttons and it triggers the model and it trains, and then it finishes, and we can run these batch tests, which I'll get into in a minute. So it's supposed to be really really pretty simple, but we have ended up doing a lot of debugging, which, you know, we're all trying to help with. A couple of us have, on the LE team have a computational linguistics background. And so they have been the ones who have really, you know, been able to do that the most. But
Wow.
we're all learning. I mean, there's not like a lot of actual code writing, but a lot of it is kind of looking at different servers and command line and kind of seeing where things are and transferring files and things like that. So that's I would say the more difficult part for me, at least, and learning more about those processes. But yeah.
So when you say the grammar writing is the easier, it's in comparison to a task like that, for example.
Yeah.
Or are there other?
I think, yes, for me, but I think like the grammar writing part, I think is relatively doable for anyone who's taken, you know, who has an undergrad degree in linguistics or.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's basically just like, do you care about language and do you pay attention and do you know a little bit about, again, like parts of speech, more, you know, morphosyntax, but like not on the technical level that you get into in grad school at all. Yeah, it's really just thinking, putting yourself in the place of a user with their phone and thinking, what could they possibly say, you know, that would be natural for them to say, and trying to represent as many of those combinations as possible.
And you mentioned that the office culture was part of the transition. What I wondered if you could tell us about, like, what that's like.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of different jobs. I did have another full-time, you know, kind of 9-to-5 office job that was somewhat tech industry, although not like this. And that was 10 years ago. So that was a while ago. That was after I first moved to San Francisco. And it was at a localization agency.
We talked about localization last week.
Oh, that's right.
It just went up a few minutes ago.
Behind.
No, it went up like literally 2 minutes before we started this interview. That was my goal for this morning.
Yeah. So I was a project manager for almost 3 years at this website localization company called translations.com. And it was a little bigger. Like, we were the San Francisco branch. There was, you know, headquarters in New York and different offices, but it wasn't, you know, a tech giant by any means. And so I've never worked in, you know, in a huge tech company like this before. So it's been interesting on multiple levels. And I guess one of them is kind of trying to figure out, just for my own interest, in my own head, what, so there's like tech giant culture, I feel like, which, you know, only having kind of one example so far, I can't really compare to other. And then there's the Korean culture aspect of it also, because it's a Korean company. And our headquarters are in Korea, and, you know, and there's huge offices all around the world. There are a couple really big offices that we kind of work with distantly in India. And the campus here, it's 2 buildings. There's about, I think, around 2,000 people between the 2 buildings. And it's primarily, you know, demographic-wise, it's primarily like majority men. There are quite a few women too, but primarily Asian Indian people. And they try to also host kind of Korean and, you know, other cultural events, which is really fun. There's a Korean class during lunch that's super informal that I've been, you know, beginner Korean, that I've been trying to go to here and there. So I guess one of the things that I've been trying to disambiguate, which I don't think is possible in my mind, is this culture of kind of crazy deadlines, and what I would consider, and most other people I work with consider, very unrealistic expectations in terms of how much can get done, how quickly, and and even the training like that needs to be involved in learning a lot of these processes, because a lot of them are new to a lot of people, even people with backgrounds in these particular fields. But and so yeah, we get a lot of like our directives from headquarters in Korea, and they're kind of translated through various people here, and so managing those expectations, I think, is something that's been kind of crazy, and I don't know again how much of that is.
Well, and that's the thing. Every workplace, deadlines mean something different in every.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's like the social construction of deadlines. I think that should be a research topic for somebody.
Yeah, and it becomes difficult at a certain, I feel like at a certain level in gigantic companies with multiple branches all around the world, communicating basically like how long particular tasks take, right? Because if you're around the world, you want a particular thing done at a particular time, but you don't know, necessarily you're not there to see all of the little tiny tasks that are involved, and then not to mention technical issues which happen all the time, like, oh, the server is being really slow, or this, we have to debug this thing, and so there's lots of that stuff. But
wow,
but it's a really nice facility, and the people are great, the food is great. Another thing I wanted to
one of those places where they have a fancy chef that cooks.
There's a cafe, like a cafeteria that has a bunch of different stations, and it's and it's like all of the food is really good.
Sorry, I cut you off. You were about to talk.
No, it's fine. Lunch is
always an opportunity to talk about food.
Yeah, lunch is always a perk. There are like different different stations. Oh yeah, so my coworker, my colleague Wency just went by. She might pop in for a second, but she went to Georgetown, and she said she knows Anastasia, or so she's working with me on the team. So it's a small world.
No way.
Yeah. She got her MA also at Georgetown in linguistics, and has some of the computational background also. On our team of 11, 12.
What a small world.
Yeah. But anyway, so I was also going to mention one of the kind of idiosyncratic things I think is funny about the campus or the culture here is it's really really dog friendly. And so people bring their dogs to work, and actually soon after I had started, they were doing like a week-long or 2-week-long filming, like internal video film of of work of employees and their dogs on campus. And,
is there a dog in this room with you right now?
No, there's not. So yeah, I don't know. So it's been really interesting. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm both, I'm taking the ups and downs as they come, kind of.
Well, that's how it goes. So we were talking just before we started about kind of the ambiguity, or that feeling of never really knowing when you've made it.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that is it's important for people to say, because I think it's something that someone who's embarking on career seems to have sometimes the impression that someone like you're in a giant tech company and you seem to have it all figured out, and you've had many experiences under your belt, so like this is it, like this is what it feels like to have achieved it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just life. Like, you never, again, I think the older you get and the more experiences you have, the more it really starts hitting you in the face. But you may, you hopefully get to a place where you're happier than ever before, but you don't, I feel like actually you don't ever really want to make it in the sense of like ultimate achievement, because then where do you go from
And what?
there? Then what?
Yeah.
Like your whole life should be, just a series of experiences, and you try to yeah, maximize how much you enjoy them. But yeah.
So I mentioned to you that I got a question recently from an undergrad at a workshop about regret.
Mm-hmm.
His question was, how often do I think, people regret their career choices? And I was speaking from my experience, which is that I think like regret isn't quite the right word. I think it's,
Yeah.
you have to try things out, and you have to, but you can't know if something's gonna
Yeah.
fit you or work out until you try. And even the reasons why something might not be a good fit might never have been something that you could have predicted from the outset. But how would you answer that question, sitting with a group of linguists?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any regrets in terms of things that I have done. I have regrets in terms of things that I haven't done. So I think that's my, my succinct answer is anything that you try and learn from, I don't think there's any reason to regret it, because you have to, you have to, right, as you said, like you have to try things to get places, and you don't know where they're going to lead. And basically putting yourself out there is how you get where you're going. There's no other way. Yeah. So for me, like, in terms of linguistics, since I got my master's, which was 4 years ago now, I've done a bunch of different things, and I've only, recently gotten this job, which is my first full-time, decently paid linguistics job outside of academia since I graduated. But I've done a ton of other, part-time things, and learned from all of those experiences. And I feel like they have given me the, some depth, but also the breadth to be able to bring, a kind of high level perspective to a lot of things that some of my colleagues who are a little bit younger, don't have.
Let's talk about some of those. I'm sure people would love to hear some of the the meandering.
Yeah, there's been a lot of meandering. Well, I did my undergrad in French, French literature mostly, and at Northwestern. And I initially, when I was that young, thought I wanted to do translation and interpreting. And, so I've always loved languages. I've always stayed in the general language path, but there's a lot of things to, ways to go within there.
Yeah.
And so then soon after I graduated, I did this, I moved out to San Francisco. I was in Chicago, and I got this job as a project manager at a localization company. And I did that for almost 3 years, and realized working, every day online with freelance translators and translation agencies, that for localizing websites and software, that was not something. I wasn't doing much translating myself, but I was managing all these projects for different clients and working a lot with these translators. And it was not, it was I had romanticized it a lot, of course, in undergrad, and it was really hard. They worked really hard, and I felt like they weren't paid enough, and it kind of de-glamorized it a little bit for me. And I had really wanted to do literary translation anyway, and there's not really much of a market for literary translation into English. I mean, it's small, but in terms of more practical career options. So I got tired of that eventually, and decided that I wanted to write my own fiction, my own literature, and also go back to school. And what could I do to make money while I was doing these things that was flexible enough? And I thought of bartending, and so I ended up quitting my job at translations.com in my mid-20s, and doing a lot of fiction writing on my own, and then starting out as a bartender, and then starting out at the program at SF State in linguistics. And I feel like then when I started in the master's at SF State, I really found my calling because I hadn't, I'd always been into language and languages, and I had even taken a couple linguistics classes in undergrad, but it hadn't really hit me then. And I like one of your.
So what did hit you? Sorry.
I mean, I think when I went back to school, I think I was much more ready for more science. And so the combination of language and science together, I was just like, oh, this is perfect. And because I was going to say, when I was young and in undergrad, like one of your previous speakers, Nick, I think, he said, when he was young, he wanted as far away from math and computers as possible. Kind of ironic that we're both now.
Yeah, both of you wound up in tech.
So when I was young, I was like, math, no, science, computers, and then in my 20s, I started reading a lot more kind of sciencey things. I don't know, I just got into it. And then I started kind of picking up a few linguistics textbooks on my own and got really into that. And so that it kind of clicked. And then starting off at SF State, the teachers were amazing, and the program, even though it was tiny, it's a small program, but I feel like I was in the place. I had matured a little bit, and also the program was just had so much to offer in terms of classes that I loved.
Remember a favorite moment? I can always remember there was a moment when I was studying for a test, and I had made this. It was my first linguistics class, and I'd made this, study guide for myself. And something about the way that I must have thought about it, but there was a way that I had constructed this thing that it showed all the nesting, like semantic, morphology, phonology, and I took a step back and I just had this whoa, I don't know why that was the moment where it really hit me.
I don't know. This is funny. I will say this because it's true. I know Jenny's listening, but her metaphor class, she started teaching there the first, my first year, my cohort's first year of the grad program, and she brought, George Lakoff's and all of their conceptual metaphor and cognitive linguistics stuff with her from UC Berkeley. And my cohort was really great also, and most of us were in this metaphor class our first year, and we really, I think a lot of us started looking at the world in a very different way. And then also in a beginning, we had a couple prerequisites, one of which was intro to syntax class, and I think it was kind of outdated principles and parameters or something, but one of the classes I had taken in undergrad was also a tree drawing, syntax, morphosyntax class, and so I was kind of doing that again, but several years later, and I think I was just ready for it, and everything
clicked
sense, and Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I did actually end up taking a couple math-y classes, not math classes, but formal logic and syntax, or formal logic, sorry, and statistics class. And I loved them because I saw how they could be applied in linguistics research. And so that just made them interesting, immediately. And so then after I graduated, I was very. Sorry?
You found a way to apply them?
Oh, well, eventually it took me a while. But no, I was on the fence about I really wanted to do my PhD. Um, but the more I learned about the just kind of how the restructuring of higher education and how that is going, it seemed less and less like a practical option, because I want my dream, like a lot of people, young
Yeah.
academics' dream is to teach and do research in
Yeah.
academia.
Yeah.
And so I started kind of thinking, outside of that and what could I do in industry. And I did a few different things, kind of volunteer things and part-time things, as I said. So I taught English at San Quentin in their, they have associate's accreditation, associate's degree through the Prison University Project, and it's all volunteer taught.
Wow.
So I did that for a couple years. So that was a very large volunteer commitment, but I learned a lot about teaching.
Wow.
And even some basic, kind of critical reading, writing, composition things that I felt like I, knew somewhat intuitively my whole life, English being my favorite subject when I was young. But teaching them is another thing, you really kind of learn them more explicitly as you're teaching. And then the inmates, the students were amazing. Actually, they were super, that's everyone's first question. Oh, what are your students like in there?
Yeah.
And yeah, they were wonderful. They were super, super grateful, super hardworking. So it was a wonderful experience. And that's an example of something that, I was doing. It was volunteer. I did it for 2 years while I was trying to figure out, what else I was going to do. And I feel like those memories will last me my whole life. And I feel like they have given me a perspective that I would never have had before listening to these guys' stories, because they grew up, their childhoods were so different from mine. So all the experiences.
It's a men's prison.
Yeah. So, there's obviously, certain restrictions where the classroom can't be exactly the same as a classroom on the outside, in what you have to wear, what colors, all these things. But it is actually an accredited program through Patton University, and yeah, they can get their AA inside. So yeah.
Wow.
So I did that, and then I went to a conference. I got accepted to present a talk from some of my master's research at a conference in Germany, the International Construction Grammar Conference. And so I went there, and that's when I kind of connected with the FrameNet people.
Uh-huh.
And so one of my recommendations was going to be, if you can go to conferences, go to conferences. Because, in the whole networking thing, I used to hate networking, just like so many other people who hate networking. But it really, you have to do it. You have to get into it.
Well, so how did it happen? They heard your talk and wanted to know more?
I had met one of the FrameNet guys before, because I had taken a couple classes at UC Berkeley when I was at SF State. There's an exchange program that you can do. So so I had met him already, and he was the only one, or a couple of them, and they were the only ones I knew at the conference. So I kind of just tagged along. Mm-hmm. And he recognized me, and we super, super friendly, and we hung out. And by the end of the conference, I said, hey, I would love to, I don't know if there's, space for me or not, but I would love to even offer volunteering. Like, that's how you get in places.
Yeah.
I would love to even just volunteer to work on FrameNet. That was what my presentation was about, was French and English FrameNet stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so I said, I would love to volunteer, do annotation, whatever you need that I could do. And so he put me in touch with the project manager, the PI, And I emailed him, and he didn't get back to me for a long time. And I emailed him the next month,
Again.
and he got back to me.
Very good.
And I went in and started volunteering for about a month and a half. And then they said, all right, I think we have a few small resources to hire you part-time. And so I worked there for about a year and a half, 20 hours a week, and then, several days bartending as well. And I just I love that project. I love frame semantics. I loved working there. And yeah, I wish they had more money to do all the things they do.
Well, maybe this is the time for me to ask kind of my big question, and folks who are on the line, if you have questions, get them fired up for the chat box. Just pop them in whenever you're ready, or we can take you off mute if anybody wants to articulate their question. But, one of my goals with this series is to kind of pull at themes of what are the big contributions that linguists can make in the world.
Yep.
So whether it be, from your work at FrameNet or from the time that I know that you're very, you're kind of aware of the ways that bartending and linguistics even work hand in hand.
Yeah.
How would you answer that question? How have you found ways to give linguistics to the world?
I'll pull a couple different examples, one from my work now at Samsung, and then maybe a couple little bartending tidbits. But from my work here, I have a perfect little anecdote, which I hope you'll enjoy.
Awesome.
So these grammars that we write, this linguist team, this LE team is very new. When I was hired, there were maybe 6 or 7 of them, and they had only been hired 3 months before. So the whole team is like 6 months old.
Wow.
And I guess we are the first linguists at least at Samsung Research America. There might be in other branches, but so previously these grammars were still being done before that, but they had previously been written in other branches, and I think primarily by engineers. And so we have in the last few months inherited kind of some of these grammars that were previously done, but where the models weren't doing very well on the data that they were producing. And so, we were tasked with fixing them up, making them more natural, making them more varied, all of those things. And one of the ones I inherited was for a rule. Remember, I talked about rules and intents. Was for a rule that was something like, for a text messaging app, that was something like read or show all of my unread messages, all of my unread texts. And so this term unread was in the grammar, and it had, a bunch of synonyms, a lot of synonyms, and some of them were ones you would expect, like, not yet read or unviewed, unseen, stuff like that. And then a couple of them one of them was unenlightened, and one of them was unlettered. And so, you think about this utterance, read my unenlightened text messages. I was like, how did they get those synonyms? And I thought about it for a second, and I thought, oh, they had looked up, unread probably in an online dictionary, and had taken all of the senses of unread. So they had taken also the sense, the illiterate sense, I guess, of unread. And so even just, and so obviously I corrected that, but knowing a little bit about polysemy, and that there are, you can have the same word and it has different senses, and you need to find the right sense, and work with context and things like that, I think is something that we are clearly very able to do, that, very, very smart people, but who have an engineering background,
right,
are not necessarily
don't know how words mean. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so that's one. And then bartending, I don't really have any huge life lessons. I just had a couple anecdotes from years of kind of overhearing other people's conversations. One of them is in terms of conversational topics, and I guess kind of gender stereotypes. People think, I mean, myself included, before I had all these years of bartending under my belt, that it's mostly women mainly talk about interpersonal relationships, like a lot more than men do. And if you have two women together, you know, the possibility that they are talking about relationships over, you know, two heterosexual men together is much, much higher. And in fact, I don't think that's true. I think I overheard so many conversations between
I love it
about interpersonal relations, like romantic or otherwise. But I thought that was kind of interesting. So dispelling gender myths, I guess.
I love it.
And then another thing that was very interesting and got kind of exhausting after a while, but is interesting, is that now with this whole internet dating phenomenon that has been, you know, going for a while, I basically got to the point pretty quickly, along with my bartending coworkers, where you could accurately judge whether two people sitting down at the bar were, you know, on one of these first like Tinder dates or whatever it was, just by, you know, maybe one or two conversational exchanges, initial exchanges, and, you know, gestures and mannerisms. And it's interesting how something like that, which is not really, hasn't been codified, you know, in a kind of strict sense, is really pretty formulaic, like in terms of the initial exchanges. So yeah, I don't know, but just
you could be a very valuable resource for somebody trying to break into that.
Yeah.
Wow, the applications. All right, so we have one question. What's a hard language problem for Bixby?
Oh, there are many. There are many. I'm trying to think of specific things. I mean, one of the things that that we are kind of ignoring at the moment, because I think that is a slightly next level thing, is kind of anaphora resolution, or, you know, right. So if you have, like Bixby doesn't really care at the moment if you, in our training data, we're saying, you know, call John and tell him, or tell her. It doesn't matter to Bixby. So the anaphora resolution thing is probably one of those slightly, on a more technical linguistic level, is a slightly more difficult thing. Let's see.
Tools that you've learned. You recommend?
I definitely recommend. So I studied some Python for quite a while, actually, but it was very slow going while I was bartending and doing FrameNet and looking at jobs. But I would definitely recommend like starting to study some Python or other programming languages on your own. Reading about machine learning, it's super interesting. Also, command line is one of the, I think, the most useful tools to know, and it's less to get basic things done with command line. It's less, you know, there's a much lower learning curve than with an actual programming language. So yeah, I would say learn how to navigate a little bit around your computer with your command line.
That's great.
Regular expressions, I don't know.
Well, Hannah, thank you so much. This has been very elucidating. I hope that maybe you've sparked some questions that have yet to be asked, but if people wanted to find you to follow up, how would they go about that? Are you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. I am also totally willing to give out my personal email. but yeah, LinkedIn is a great place. Again, like I think one of your previous speakers said, just write me a little note,
Yeah.
Just to let me know that you're contacting me because you watched the talk or whatever.
I think that needs to be reiterated
Mm-hmm.
often.
Yeah.
It's important. Good
Yeah.
email. I mean, good LinkedIn. It makes such a difference.
Yeah, it does.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, please contact me. I would love to answer. I mean, like you said, I was just kind of recently in the job search phase, and so I know very much what it's like, and I would love to, pass it forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So join us next week. Hannah's planted a seed about framing. We've got Mackenzie Price from the Frameworks Institute going to be talking at the campfire about framing. So check out, you can check out past recordings. This one will go up too on careerlinguist.com. And also check out, we're gearing up, we're gathering kindling for Career Camp. Career Camp will be launching on November 6th. So if you're looking for, a chance to come together with a community of linguists, it's 5 weeks of focused navigating, I say orienteering through story listening, story finding, and storytelling to get you ready for your next steps of your career. So thanks again, Hannah. It was great talking to you.
You too. Take